Picture this. You're in a meeting. Something slightly off kilter happens. Maybe a cat comes into view on someone's screen. You make eye contact with a coworker and you realize you're both kind of slightly smiling. Silliness is confirmed. You're sharing a little joy. It's lightening up the day, the meeting. This is an example of nonverbal communication, and it's just one of an enormous repertoire of gestures and expressions that we humans keep on hand or on face. And now robots want to get in on the game. In the world of words, machines are definitely catching up. Think Chat GPT, think audio transcription. But in nonverbal communication, there's definitely a lag. This week in Science Robotics, Hod Lipson and colleagues write about robots that can anticipate your smile and time theirs with it. For bonding. Hi, Hod. Welcome to the Science Podcast.
My pleasure.
Why is it a good thing? Why is this something we should try to do, to have robots engage in nonverbal communication?
Well, I think it's very similar to the reason we want robots and AI to learn to communicate in verbal communication. We just want to connect with these machines. We want to allow them to communicate with us better, to convey information. And that's an incredible channel that we're missing right now.
Right.
Machines can communicate incredibly well, both in video and in text, verbally, if you like. But when it comes to facial expressions and nonverbal communication, they're less than a one-year-old child. They can't even smile. So We're trying to catch up, a lot to catch up there. These are things that we take for granted, but are very, very important. In fact, some people say that humans communicate with each other more through nonverbal communication than they do through verbal communication. So it's a really, really important channel that we've been neglecting.
They have a much smaller bandwidth if you think about it that way. If humans are communicating on all these levels, the robots are only picking up on a certain level and also only expressing on a certain level.
Exactly.
We're also talking about anticipating the expression or the gesture. How is that different than just reacting?
Right. So there's a lot of things that go into nonverbal communication. These are actually things that sort of are very difficult to quantify. I mean, if you think about it, the reason we need to say cheese when we take a photo is because actually smiling on demand is actually pretty hard.
Yeah.
And you're trying to explain to a child how to smile. It's actually very, very difficult. You can talk about verbal communication pretty well, but how to do all these other things these non-verbal communication is really challenging, in part because there's a lot of motion involved. There's a lot of channels within the facial communication, a lot of muscles involved. It's not just a channel of words, but also there's a timing issue, which you refer to. All right. So smiling at the wrong time can backfire. If even by a few milliseconds, you smile a little bit too late, it feels like you're pandering maybe, we humans are very, very good at picking up incorrect smiles that are awkward, smiles that are badly timed. So getting the robots to do all these things at the right time, in addition to the right way, is really, really challenging. That's what we're trying to do.
You actually have these robot faces, these heads, looking in the mirror to make expressions. Why do they need to do that? How does that train them better than, say, typing in next smile after 5 milliseconds?
Turns out, first of all, making a robot face that can smile was incredibly challenging from a mechanical point of view. It's harder than making a robotic hand.
Yeah.
A robotic leg. I mean, there's so many muscles. And the more muscles we put into the soft face, it was never enough. It couldn't quite smile all the way. So there's a lot going on mechanically. But then on top of that, it's very difficult to control. It's very difficult to know how to exactly pull all these muscles to create a smile that's authentic. And again, we're very good at spotting inauthentic smiles. So we're very, very sensitive to that. So if you look at most robotic systems out there, none of them smile, first of all. Almost, I haven't seen any robot that can smile. And even those that can talk on stage and do all these fancy things, they barely smile. They're very cold.
Very stoic, yeah.
Yeah, and they have these Muppet mouths that open and close, but they don't lip sync in any deep way. So it's really, really hard to do. So we resorted to this idea of machine learning, which is what we do with everything else. Forget about trying to program these robots to smile. Just let them learn. And how do you learn? You watch people. This is how babies learn. This is how kids learn. This is how adults learn. And this is what these robots do. They just watch people smile and make other facial expressions, and they pick it up.
Yeah, so this is taking advantage of machine learning and also, how good we are with computer vision now. So
Exactly.
the robot can see itself and interpret that and then turn it into motion. It's quite a number of steps in order to train a robot to look in the mirror, make expressions, but then also you trained it to look at people and see what their expressions are with the hope of gaining mimicry. So how does this all come together? Like, how do they predict, as you say, you want them to smile at the same time? How do they predict when someone is going to smile?
So it turns out that before you smile, so the robot is learning to smile and get it all right in the right timing, but it picks up on cues that, we humans, I don't know if maybe subconsciously we pick up on these things, but if you could slow mo what your face looks like before you smile, like 300 milliseconds before you smile. I haven't actually looked at it, but there's probably we squint our eyes and I don't know, nostrils expand. I don't know, there's probably some minute gestures that we make just about as we're thinking of smiling, and this is probably what the robot picks up on. I don't know what it is, but it's pretty reliably
One of those mysteries of machine learning at this point.
one of these mysteries. Exactly. But I can tell you, I'm a jaded roboticist. I don't smile at machines, but when this robot smiles at me, I smile back.
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
I can't hold back. I mean, we are this is so deep in us to connect with things that smile. And when the robot can smile genuinely, it's very, very endearing. It's a whole new level of communication. But there's one more thing I wanted to say, which is a little bit behind the scenes, but it's really important, is that the robot spends a lot of time modeling itself. This is something that we spend a lot of time in our lab. We call it self-modeling, the machines that learn about themselves. And when it's smiling in front of the mirror, it's sort of like learning how its face will look as it pulls all these muscles. It creates a sort of self-image. Just like you can close your eyes and you know that when you make a certain facial expressions, you kind of know what you look like. This is how you can communicate. You know what you sound like and you know what you look like. The robot knows what it's going to look like when it's going to do certain things. And that self-image, if you like, allows it to react and anticipate and make gestures that it hasn't made before even.
Mm-hmm. When I first read the paper, I was like, oh, is this also tuning in to, say, conversation or, emotional tenor? Or is it picking up on other cues, or is it just looking at people's faces and mimicking? And is that something that you'd be interested in doing?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So no, the robot is not picking up on all this extra stuff. So that's absolutely important. It's not even something that we can get away without doing. So this is our robot is now literally like a baby that just learned to smile. It doesn't understand anything about context, smiles every time they see their parent, or or in the wrong time possibly. But this is where we're at. So there's a lot more to go.
Yeah.
And understanding these cues and when to smile and what context. And sometimes facial mimicry is okay, like smiling, but sometimes frowning is not a good facial mimicry. If somebody frowns, the last thing you want to do is frown back.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to smile back, right? So there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, you don't want to get in a fight.
Exactly. So there's absolutely, we're not even close to mastering nonverbal communication, but it's the first step. And I think it's an important one because it's one of those things that we humans don't even appreciate how well we do.
Yeah.
Moving your face, moving these 300 muscles in concert, it's a beautiful symphony. To making a good smile is a symphony that comes together in a beautiful way. Very, very hard for robots. Robots can write a poem and they can write a technical report in no time, but smiling, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know where I read it, but the idea that the face is like a pool of water and it just like a tiny ripple moves across it and everybody else can read that.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. So we're just beginning to realize how difficult it is. We have this saying in engineering that you don't really understand something until you build it.
Yeah.
And I think this is for us the first time we really are diving into the complexity of a smile.
When I looked at these videos, I felt all the emotions. I was like, okay, this is creepy. And then I was like, oh, but it's learning to smile. Yeah, I kind of appreciate that. Like, that's nice. And then I eventually started to feel that, like, oh, this is not creepy. This is a smiley guy. And I did kind of come around after watching the videos. But I wonder, why are some of these robot faces blue?
We wanted to step away or outside this uncanny valley, as it's called. This idea that it looks like a human, but it's not a human. It looks like a corpse, or whatever. It's not quite there. It's kind of disgusting. So we say, okay, let's just make them blue. We're not even trying to make them human. We had green versions and purple versions and all kinds. And
Interesting.
so we really want to sort of step away from trying to look like a human. But then, if you put a wig and lipstick and all kinds of things on it, it really begins to get a personality, let's put it that way. And that personality actually adds. So, I think it's inescapable that eventually these robots are going to start looking like humans, and we're going to start to bond with them whether we like it or not.
Is there a concern that as they become more anthropomorphic, that people will use these robots to play on people's emotions and to manipulate them into doing things? If you can form a bond, you can take advantage of that bond.
Right. Absolutely. That's a serious concern, not just for manipulation. I think, yes, people, just like AI technology, as it gets better, you can do good things and you can do bad things with it. That's the conundrum of AI ethics, I think, in general. So yes, it could be a very powerful technology, but I think just to add to that, it's not only malicious actors. It could be even that for good reasons. If people could potentially connect to a robot more than they connect to a human friend. And at that point, there's a loss involved in that. So I worry about these things. On the other hand, the potential, for example, to communicate better, to communicate faster, more easily, more effectively is enormous. So we're going to have to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Our next thing is to work on lip sync. A lip sync while the robot is talking is very, very hard as well. But all these things,
so while it's producing sound, when you say
Yes.
lip sync, I thought immediately, is it going to be doing karaoke? But you mean like
talking
to its own voice.
Yeah, to its own voice. So when it's going to say hello, it's actually going to move its lips in the right way.
Oh my gosh.
And this is,
wow.
Again, you haven't seen robots do that.
No.
It takes it to a whole different level. If you think that engaging with ChatGPT is interesting, just wait until these things become physical and all bets are off.
Definitely. All right. Thank you so much, Hod.
Thank you.
Hod Lipson is a roboticist who works in the areas of artificial intelligence and digital manufacturing, and he's a professor at Columbia University. You can find a link to the science robotics paper we discussed at science.org/podcast. Stay tuned for a chat with researcher and letter writer Margaret Handley about how her past was a prologue to her science career. We have a different kind of segment this week. We're actually going to have a letter writer read the letter that they publish in Science. This is going to be from Margaret Handley. She's going to read her letter about an important musical instrument that influenced her life in science. So we're going to have a letter writer read their letter. But first, we have Jennifer Sills, our letters editor. She's going to talk about the kinds of letters that come into Science. The letter for today is part of a series called Past as Prologue. Letters editor Jennifer Sills explains this type of letter and the other kinds we have.
This letter did come in, I believe, as a Past as Prologue feature, which is focused on how does your background or your childhood or your family influence your scientific or career decisions.
Yeah, so you said it was called a feature. It's a feature, but it's in letters?
Yeah, so a standard letter has to fit a certain format. It shouldn't be anecdotal. It should be connected to a current event. It should be a call to action. There are certain things that we look for in a standard letter, but that doesn't give us the flexibility to really look into who are scientists and who is this community that we're representing in the letters pages. And so we have a few different features which provide that. We have some other features, like a life in science is a feature that describes just a funny or a quirky or an interesting situation that you could say only a scientist would have that experience. They often have to do with field work or animals, but not always. And we also have a feature called Outside the Tower that focuses on scientist advocacy experiences. And that gives us a chance to say, what are scientists doing to bring their science to children, to prisoners, to people in far-flung places who don't have access to all the information that we have. And so all of these features, their purpose is to kind of give a more well-rounded idea of who is the scientific community.
So to you, this story of the fern mandolin really fit in with all these other, past examples.
Well, I wouldn't say that they have to fit in. I would say that it provided a new avenue of what it looks like to take your family history and apply it to your career decisions. And I think part of this work is always about combating the stereotypes of scientists. And I think each of these pieces in their own way really makes you think, well, scientists are just a community like any community, and every scientist is different and has a different story. And even scientists in the same field come to that field from completely different places for different reasons with different goals. And I think having something in letters that makes that point is important for our readers.
Absolutely. All right, Jennifer, that was super interesting. Thanks so much for talking with me.
Thank you.
That was our letters editor, Jennifer Sills. Now we're going to hear from researcher Margaret Handley. In her letter, Margaret writes about the resurfacing of a relic from her childhood, what she remembers about it in the past, how she feels about seeing it now, and she reflects on the influence it had on her work today with unhoused people. After we hear the letter, Margaret's going to stick around and talk a little bit with us about what she wrote.
My dad's prized possession was a Gibson 1920s fern mandolin. Inlaid with mother of pearl, the handmade instrument made a marvelous sound, perfect for playing traditional bluegrass melodies. As kids, my brother and I would visit the fern mandolin in our dad's storage locker, the type with a big pull-up door. In hindsight, the unique, delicate piece seemed out of place in the vast industrial storage park landscape. But the locker was my dad's only permanent address. He couch-surfed, rented rooms, sometimes lived out of his car. People sometimes called him a drifter, but when he played the fern mandolin and sang, his captivating grin filled the space. There was so much promise in that locker. In his youth, my dad had played in a bluegrass band. He often sang songs that reflected his rural background, growing up in Texas, and his experience moving to California during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. The folk song, Freight Train, about the lonesome life of riding on the cross-country freight trains, was also one of his favorites. When I was in my early 20s and just starting my studies to become an epidemiologist, my dad disappeared. My brother and I searched for him at his most recent address and at local flea markets, where he liked to go to trade guitar and bicycle parts. We never found him. Now, I work with an interdisciplinary team of investigators and clinicians focusing on understanding and preventing homelessness. We've explored when stays with family members do and don't work out. We've worked with a cohort of unhoused people as they age to learn about how their needs change and how they care for each other. The idea of helping people stay in housing, improving their lives as they revolve around the uncertainty of a storage locker existence, keeps me going on my research-weary days. I often remember how natural it seemed to spend time with my dad at his locker, and how unimportant it was to me that he didn't always have an address. Belongings in lockers, on the street, or seized during evictions reveal people's complex inner lives, histories, and talents. I want our society to appreciate, as I try to, the richness of the lives of those who are unhoused or marginally housed. We never knew what happened to my dad's storage locker, but a few years ago, the fern mandolin resurfaced at a rare instrument auction. My brother and I went to see it. It was still beautiful.
So do you play music?
I like to sing, but I don't play myself.
The song that we heard with your letter, I know your daughter and her friend composed it and performed it for us, but is it bluegrass?
It's kind of inspired by bluegrass, but I wouldn't call it that per se. It doesn't have a mandolin itself in it, but it's sort of in the style of, I think, building off of a blues tradition and a bluegrass tradition.
Yeah. So your daughter plays some of these instruments?
Yeah, she plays guitar. Her siblings play as well, horn instruments and guitar, piano. They all play piano, and my husband plays guitar.
So how do you know that when you went to the rare instrument auction, how do you know that that was the same for a mandolin?
It's not like 100% sure, but there were only a couple of them ever made in that particular style. And the case itself, it was this particular color, this bright green. It hadn't faded, as if it hadn't been used a lot. And there were these packets of extra strings, and they were tied together with a particular kind of string that my brother and I recognized from when our dad made kites. It was a special kind of string. So when we were looking at it, thinking about the rareness of this mandolin, that it was found in San Jose where our dad last had lived, and that there were strings that were tied together with a special kind of kite string, we thought it was our dad's.
You're pretty sure that this was your dad's mandolin that was put up for auction. Why didn't you or someone in your family try to buy it?
Yeah, we didn't try to buy it. It was really very expensive. And I think for us, it was nice to see that it was highly valued still, the rareness of it, the beauty of the instrument. It was going to be purchased in the community of people who are playing the mandolin. And while my brother plays guitar, he doesn't play the mandolin in particular. And so neither of us thought we needed to have it.
Needed to be with a musician who would appreciate it.
Yeah.
And just seeing it is kind of amazing, right? Just knowing that it's around.
Seeing it was amazing, and knowing that it had sort of been maybe quietly waiting for its next life, that it was found and part of a mandolin community, was an exciting component for us. There's a lot of interest in these beautiful old mandolins. And so on one level, it was bittersweet to see it for my brother and I sort of out of range in a way, but also it was nice that it was in a community that could appreciate its specialness.
Absolutely. Now, how did you end up writing a letter about this to science?
I work with a training program, and we try to help people tell their stories in different kinds of ways. It's an NIH career development program, and our program is called the RISE program for Research and Implementation Science for Equity. And a lot of people in our program have had pretty interesting experiences about how they came to do research on health equity. So I was looking for places to basically ideas to share with our group. And I saw that and I thought, I kind of have this story I've written for myself after we visited the mandolin. And I thought, well, maybe this would be something to give an example of how to do this, just even if it didn't get accepted.
Yeah. So you saw the prompt to pass as prologue.
Yeah. So a colleague and I were both looking around to find things where they could write sort of personal essays in their work in healthcare or in public health. And so I came across that and said, I think this would be good for our group. I'll sort of test the waters and submit this story that I'd actually written. I'd written it in a slight kind of different way, more for my family. And so I rewrote it also. I mean, I've shared the story with people I work with, and, they know my story, and I told them about it when it happened.
And how much of an influence do you feel like your father's situation had on you deciding to focus so much on homelessness?
It's not that it was that direct in a way, because I didn't really see him as a person who was homeless, so I think that you can look at that and say that is part of his life experience, obviously a very significant part of my life experience, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I think of him in that particular way. And I think that's part of the point.
Yeah, it is. It surprises you when you look back at your youth and say, oh, well, that probably had something to do with where I am today, but never been front of mind, right?
Yeah, I think the larger sort of focus on people who fall through the cracks is sort of a consistent component of how I've approached public health training and what I've ended up doing. And I think that you can link, whether it's things that happened in my life or just observations I made in the moments in time that I lived through history, that I gravitated to things like that. So this is just one of those stories.
And music has also stayed as part of your life.
I'm a huge music fan. I listen to music a lot, and I love all kinds of blues-influenced music.
Very cool. Yeah, I would love it if my family made music around me. I am not a musician, but like everybody else knows how to play stuff. And I just want them to I just want to be living that life, but I don't get to.
I know. And I thought I would learn when my children were learning music and they had piano lessons, but I was kind of doing other stuff. I had a job. I really do like how much they play music all around me. And for example, we have music night at our house often. So I'm part of that and I sing, but I'm not the best, but I like to sing.
We're not going to make you sing. Margaret Hanley is a professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics and Medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, and co-director of PRISE, Partnerships for Research and Implementation Science for Equity, as well as a faculty member for vulnerable populations at the Benhoff Housing and Homelessness Initiative. Special thanks to our guest musicians. They created and played a piece of music for this segment, Kate Rose and Josephine Haas. Jennifer Sills is the letters editor for Science.